President.
The senator from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Are we in a quorum call?
We are.
I ask that we dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have really heard quite a bit over the past few weeks, and especially this past weekend, about this administration and their decision to do away with Title 42. And I would take this opportunity to remind my Democratic colleagues that President Biden himself admitted that our southern border will be, and I quote him, chaotic for a while, end quote, post Title 42. So the expectation is that this will create chaos, and they know it, but they're doing it anyway. In the days right before Title 42 was terminated, we were already seeing unprecedented chaos along our southern border. Again, they knew it. Chaos was coming, but they were going to do it anyway because it serves their purposes. Now, here is some of the chaos that has actually happened at that border. Now, these are last week's numbers. They're not my numbers. They're not Republican numbers. They're Border Patrol's numbers. This is what this administration is doing to the communities that are along that southern border. Border Patrol reported last week 68,000 apprehensions, and they seized hundreds of pounds of narcotics, including 56 pounds of fentanyl. Bear in mind, 1 little gram, 1 little touch is enough to kill. We're all hearing 1 pill will kill. And yes, think about 56 pounds of that coming in. What would that do to your community? Now, at the same time, on top of the 68,000 that were apprehended, there were 16,000 gotaways that they could see on surveillance video, but they could not get to them. Those are the known gotaways. So they cross the border and they go running into the country. There are also the unknown gotaways. And Mr. President, as you know, as Border Patrol is out, as they are going through their day, many times they find evidence of people that have crossed where they couldn't see them on video. They weren't wanting to be apprehended. Those are the really bad guys that are bringing in more drugs, more terrorists, more gangs into this country. In the past 72 hours alone, we've seen 3 agents assaulted. These are our Border Patrol agents. They are being assaulted. Bear in mind, the cartels, global organizations, the cartels are in charge of that border on the Mexico side. So 3 of our agents have been assaulted. Almost 15,000 more apprehensions in 72 hours, and more than 4,300 gotaways that evaded capture. Now, as I said, these are not my numbers. They're not Republican numbers. These are the numbers of the Border Patrol. They're the Biden administration numbers. They know they are creating chaos, that they're making life difficult, that they are making the job of Border Patrol harder every single day. But it serves their purpose, so they do it anyway. They know exactly what's happening and what will happen if they don't regain control of that border. More chaos. The chaos is going to escalate because the drug cartels were exploiting the end of Title 42 well before last week. I have on my poster this weekend review with the apprehensions we've talked about. $83,000 that was seized from the cartels, 224 pounds of marijuana, 179 pounds of meth, 56 pounds of fentanyl, 34 pounds of cocaine, 5 pounds of heroin. You know, I had, Madam President, a sheriff tell me they used to apprehend drugs in grams. Now it is all pounds. Why is it pounds? It is because the cartels are so emboldened. Oh, here we go. We've got some more. 7 firearms, 5 sex offenders. These are people that are convicted of crimes in their countries, and they're trying to come in here. A lot of these countries are emptying their jails and trying to unload them on us. Well, 4 gang members coming to a neighborhood near you. Why is it that crime is running rampant? Well, we know. Now, this is all from last week. 2 felons, 1 subject with 5 warrants. That's what they are dealing with. Now, from October of last year to March of this year, agents apprehended more than 1 million illegal immigrants. Title 42 was still in place then. Last week, tens of thousands of people were camped on the Mexico side of the border, and nearly 80,000 more were gathered in Guatemala with plans to come into the United States. They're making their way here. The cartels have a plan. The Biden administration and the Democrats have zero of a plan. So we need Congress to step in and make certain that we get this border secured. On his second day in office, President Biden terminated the successful Trump-era migrant protection protocols that is known as Remain in Mexico. The policy required illegal immigrants seeking asylum at the southern border or without proper ID to return to Mexico to await for their hearing. It worked. Guess what? It worked. Now, instead of keeping it in place, the Biden administration and the Democrats have decided to go back to the old failed catch and release policy. Come on in. We'll give you a court date. Court dates now are about 2030, but come on. We'll let you in. They will be caught, and then they're released into the country. Bringing back Remain in Mexico is essential to maintaining our nation's security and sovereignty, especially now that the Biden administration has completely undermined Border Patrol by stripping them of their Title 42 authority. So, this month, I introduced the Make the Migrant Protection Protocols Mandatory Act. Bill is simple. It mandates that individuals seeking asylum at the southern border or without proper ID must return to Mexico while they await their immigration proceedings. We should pass this as soon as possible. Now, that's step 1. Step 2 is to strike at the heart of the cartel's $13 billion criminal enterprise. Since President Biden took office, human trafficking has become even more pervasive at the southern border. The State Department estimates that the cartels move as many as 17,500 people across the border every year. 1 in 3 is a child. We also know that the cartels overwhelmingly target young girls and sell them into sex slavery. And with the end of Title 42, these criminal abusers will feel particularly emboldened to expand their business. I want you to think about those numbers. Human trafficking has become a $13 billion business. Go back to 2019, it was a $500 million a year business. Ask yourself, what has changed in that time? It is an administration with very lax or no border policy. Their policy is open it up so that we, the taxpayers, finish the cartel's job. And it is a humanitarian crisis because women and girls, 90% of which make this journey, are being sexually assaulted. So I would ask my colleagues, are you okay with that? Are you okay with the cartels making this money? Are you okay with them moving these individuals and selling these women and girls into sex slavery? Now, the Save Girls Act, which I introduced this year, Senator Klobuchar has joined me on this. It establishes a $50 million grant program to put critical resources into the hands of state and local officials and nonprofits so they can fight the smuggling and trafficking of girls across the border and into the communities. This persistent abuse of young women will only worsen with Title 42 gone. There's no reason why this body should not immediately pass this bill and help to protect these women and children that are making this journey. As we speak, cartels are exploiting Congress's inaction. The president, he's asleep at the wheel. His borders are missing in action. And his cabinet officials are busy evading requests for information about what precisely they have been doing with taxpayer time and money for the last few years. We won't be able to fix this overnight, but we have to start somewhere. We need to make Remain in Mexico the law of the land and pass the Save Girls Act and give law enforcement the tools they need to secure the border before we lose complete and total control of it. Madam President, I ask that the remainder of my remarks be placed separately in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Over the past few weeks, I've had many conversations with Tennessee business owners about their concerns with the Pillar 2 tax regime. These proposed rules started to take shape under the Trump administration and were intended to streamline the international tax system. Well, that has all run off the rails after the Biden administration started to get involved in these negotiations. And the progress that had been made suffered the same fate as many policies that have helped America rebound from the recession that took place in '09. Once again, the Biden administration has rubber-stamped a deal that will paint a target on the backs of American companies and allow other countries to subsidize their own economies with American tax dollars. Indeed, when you look at this, Pillar 2 will force multinational companies making more than $800 million in revenue to pay at least a 15% effective tax rate on income earned in every country where they operate, including their home base. If a company isn't paying at least 15% at home, other countries would be allowed to impose an additional tax on their domestic income using the undertaxed profits rule, or it's referred to as UTPR. Now, I want you to think about this. What the Biden administration has signed up for is going to be other countries that say, oh, you're not paying enough tax, American business, so you're going to have to pay tax over here and over here and over here. It becomes a money grab on U.S. businesses. Now, this undertaxed profits rule, doesn't that just sound odd? Your profits are undertaxed. Undertaxed. This was designed so they can enforce what is called the global minimum tax. And I'm sure that in the coming months, we'll hear more about this scheme and what it's actually going to do. But Tennesseans living and working in the real world have highlighted with me a couple of different problems that they see. First, this plan undermines multiple congressionally approved bipartisan tax treaties that were negotiated to help American companies be more competitive. If we allow this deal to go forward, we will hurt businesses and severely limit our own ability to respond to a recession or bolster our supply chains. So what they are doing, what the Biden administration is doing, is saying, all right, all of you companies and all these other countries out here, come on, this is your chance to tell U.S. companies how you think they ought to run their business, and they're going to have to pay you. Does that sound like something that is a pro-America economics policy? Of course not. Why would anybody at the Department of Commerce or anyone in this administration want to make life harder and more unfair for U.S. companies that are fighting supply chain issues, that are struggling every day to keep people employed and to raise their wages? You know, it's kind of like betting against yourself. But oh no, they do it. That's their plan. Second problem is even more egregious. By design, these new rules will force the U.S. into a one-size-fits-all tax regime we have repeatedly rejected, and it will make American companies the primary target of yet another punishing mandate. This country leads the world in job creation and growth, specifically because we embrace tax incentives and other pro-business policies. But Pillar 2 will penalize businesses for taking advantage of pro-growth incentives, and no one will fare worse than the United States. Here is the chart to make it easy for everyone to understand. And Madam President, I invite my colleagues to take a good look at this. This is what the global minimum tax scheme will do to U.S. companies. This is what Pillar 2 and the undertaxed profits rule will do to employers in your state, in everyone's state. This is what is going to happen. Take a look at this. Global minimum tax. 39.6% of that is coming from companies that are here. They're in every one of our states, every single one. 39.6% of this is coming from U.S. companies. Is that fair? Is that equal? Well, let's look at the numbers from the IMF. Let's look at what they're saying about that. Now, when you look at global GDP, the U.S. portion of that is 24%, which means that this rule would impose a massively disproportionate tax burden on American companies. Remember, we're at 39.6% for American companies. Well, the China slice, this is a little gray slice down here. It contributes 17.9% of the GDP, but they're only going to account for 7.6% of the income targeted by the UTPR. France, Germany, other major countries would also account for much less compared to their share of the GDP. This rule punishes growth and success, which is bad for investment. It is bad for people that depend on these countries. It is companies. It is bad for our citizens and their paycheck, and it is a way to redistribute the wealth of the United States to other countries by constructing this. I think this is a really bad deal. Now, it also benefits our adversaries. The Chinese Communist Party, they are jumping for joy over these things because Beijing added some language to Pillar 2 that exempts state-owned companies. The OECD guidelines define this in the simplest terms as an enterprise under some manner of state control, under some manner of state control, that offers goods or services for profit in the same manner a private operator would. Well, Madam President, under this definition, what enterprise in China isn't state-owned? If this seems like a win for communism, it's because it is. Under the proposed rule, the CCP, which has a stake in all these companies in China, that's how you do business, they would be able to subsidize their own economy with foreign tax dollars while avoiding the additional tax burden. And of course, we know what the CCP is doing with their profits that they're making. They're building up their military. They're bullying Taiwan, Philippines, the island nations, putting 7% of their GDP in building up their military because they want to dominate us. Well, business owners in Tennessee have been keeping an eye on these rules, and I haven't found anybody that thinks this thing is a good idea. Red tape alone will dissuade businesses from investing here because the cost of compliance will not be worth the potential profit. This, of course, presents a problem because right now Tennessee is benefiting tremendously from direct foreign investment. You have, here's a great example, SK Innovations partnership with Ford Motor Company at the Blue Oval City plant in Haywood County. It's bringing thousands of jobs, millions of dollars of investment to West Tennessee. And Blue Oval is already mired in red tape and in supply chain issues, courtesy of this administration. If you allow Pillar 2 to take hold and penalize these investments, Ford and SK and that innovation and Tennessee workers will suffer. So will the hundreds of suppliers, the small businesses, the skilled workers who are depending on these jobs to help a lot of these small businesses grow. We'll see the cracks spread to the municipalities that are tackling the issues of expanding utilities, roads, and infrastructure. Local housing developers will take a hit, many of these small businesses, and businesses that were really planning to flourish will fail. I find it disturbing that this administration will waste time spreading false claims about their legendary job creation skills while they write rules that are undermining the ability to do business. I know that my colleagues on each side of the aisle are flabbergasted by this because we all said as much during last week's Finance Committee hearing. This country is on the verge of another economic disaster because this administration refuses to stand up for American companies, homegrown companies. Many of them started small and they have grown. Instead of fighting for counties like Haywood County, Tennessee, the White House is serving up Haywood County's taxpayers on a silver platter. Why? Redistribute the wealth. Look at who's going to pay. Instead of fostering a competitive playing field, they're punishing businesses because they are successful. Redistribute the wealth. Look at this pie chart. Take it in. All this has done is show the American people that they are not the Biden administration's priorities. It is clear. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Senator from Indiana.